Chloe and Ethan looked like the perfect couple. Their two-story colonial on Maplewood Avenue was the envy of the neighborhood, with its charming white shutters and neatly trimmed hedges. Max, their golden retriever, patrolled the yard like a friendly sentinel, barking cheerfully at passersby. To the world, Chloe and Ethan were the picture of suburban bliss. Ethan, a high school history teacher, had a knack for storytelling that made him popular with his students and colleagues. He was dependable, patient, and kind, the kind of man people trusted. Chloe, on the other hand, was the creative force in their dynamic. Her floral shop, Petal and Vine, was a beloved fixture in the town square, drawing in customers with its lush bouquets and bright window displays. To outsiders, they had everything, but inside their home, Chloe felt the cracks growing. Their conversations had become routine. Ethan would ask about her day, and Chloe would reply with vague answers. She loved him, at least she thought she did, but something was missing. Life with Ethan felt too predictable, too safe. She wanted passion, excitement, something that made her heart race. One summer afternoon, Chloe noticed a leak in the back room of her shop. The plaster ceiling sagged ominously, threatening to collapse. Her assistant recommended Liam, a contractor known for his skill and quick turnaround. The first time Liam walked into the shop, Chloe felt the air shift. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and a confident grin that seemed to challenge the world. He exuded a magnetism that made Chloe's breath hitch. "Chloe, right?" Liam said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp. "Yes," Chloe replied, her voice faltering slightly. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." As Liam examined the ceiling, he filled the silence with easy conversation. He talked about his travels, his time in the army, and the thrill of living life one day at a time. Chloe found herself hanging on his every word. By the time Liam left, Chloe's heart was racing in a way it hadn't in years. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm of shared moments. Liam worked on the renovations during Chloe's shop hours, their conversations becoming more personal with each passing day. Chloe learned that Liam had no ties, no family in town, no steady relationship. He seemed to live in the moment, free from the constraints of routine. The more she talked to him, the more she found herself drawn to his energy. One evening, as Liam packed up his tools, he lingered by the counter. "You're here late a lot," he remarked. Chloe shrugged. "The shop's my baby. I like making sure everything's just right." Liam tilted his head, studying her. "Seems like there's more to it than that." Chloe felt her cheeks flush. She didn't answer, and Liam didn't press. But something shifted between them in that moment, a silent understanding that neither was ready to name. It happened one evening after closing. Liam had stayed late to finish the shelving in the back room, and Chloe had brought him coffee as a thank you. They stood close, the tension between them palpable. "Chloe," Liam said softly, his voice low, "do you ever feel like you're stuck?" Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" Liam stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "Like there's something more out there, something you're missing." Before she could answer, Liam leaned in and kissed her. It was brief but electric, sending a jolt through her body. Chloe pulled away, her heart pounding. "I can't do this," she whispered, but even as she said the words, she knew she didn't mean them. The kiss opened the floodgates. What began as stolen moments in the back room of her shop quickly escalated in a secret rendezvous. Chloe lied to Ethan about late nights at work, crafting excuses to spend more time with Liam. With Liam, Chloe felt alive. He made her laugh, made her heart race in ways Ethan hadn't in years. But the guilt gnawed at her. She would come home to find Ethan waiting for her with dinner or a glass of wine, his smile warm and trusting. "How's the shop coming along?" he'd ask, genuinely interested. "It's fine," Chloe would reply, her voice hollow. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions, but Chloe's behavior had become impossible to ignore. She was distant, distracted, and her phone never seemed to leave her side. One evening, while Chloe was in the shower, Ethan noticed her laptop open on the kitchen table. A half-written email caught his eye, and he froze when he saw the name in the address line, Liam. The message was short but damning. "I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I'm with you, It feels like I'm finally awake." Ethan felt his stomach drop. His hands trembled as he closed the laptop, the realization crashing over him like a tidal wave. Chloe was having an affair. Ethan didn't confront Chloe right away. Instead, he called Rachel, an old friend who worked in private security. When he told her what he'd found, she offered a solution: discreet cameras in Chloe's shop. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Rachel asked. "I need to know for sure," Ethan replied, his voice steely. A week later, Rachel sent Ethan the footage. The clip showed Chloe and Liam kissing in the back room, their bodies pressed together like a scene from a romantic drama. Ethan's heart broke as he watched, the betrayal cutting deeper than he thought possible. Ethan sat at the kitchen table that night, the footage playing in a loop in his mind. Every kiss, every touch, every stolen moment between Chloe and Liam was like a dagger to his chest. He wanted to yell, to scream, to demand answers, but something stopped him. He knew Chloe, and he knew that a direct confrontation wouldn't have the impact he needed. If he wanted her to truly understand the gravity of her betrayal, he had to be deliberate, calculated. The next morning, Ethan called Rachel again. "I need your help with one more thing," he said, his voice firm. Rachel hesitated. "What are you planning, Ethan?" "Something they won't forget," he replied. Over the next week, Ethan meticulously crafted his plan. He decided to lure Chloe and Liam into a situation where they couldn't deny their actions, where their betrayal would be laid bare, not just to him, but to each other. He started by using Chloe's email account to send a message to Liam. The subject line was simple: "Let's talk." In the body, he wrote, "Meet me at Lake Haven this Saturday. I need to see you." Lake Haven was the place where Ethan had proposed to Chloe years ago, a spot steeped in memories of their love. It was a cruel irony, but Ethan didn't care. When Chloe mentioned over breakfast that she might need to work late on Saturday, Ethan didn't flinch. "Do what you need to do," he said, hiding the bitterness in his voice. On Saturday, Ethan arrived at the cabin early, parking his car out of sight. He wanted to see how it would all unfold. As expected, Liam arrived first, looking unsure as he stepped out of his truck. He glanced around, his brow furrowed in confusion. Chloe arrived shortly after, her car kicking up gravel as it pulled into the driveway. When she stepped out and saw Liam, her face went pale. "Liam," she asked, her voice trembling. You asked me to come here," Liam replied, holding up his phone to show the email. Chloe's heart sank. "I didn't send that," she whispered, but before she could say more, Ethan stepped out of the shadows. "Of course you didn't," Ethan said, his voice cold. "I did." Chloe and Liam turned to face him, their expressions a mix of shock and dread. "Why don't we all go inside?" Ethan said, gesturing toward the cabin. "We need to talk." Inside the cabin, Ethan wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and played the footage Rachel had given him. Every kiss, every stolen glance was there, displayed on the screen for both of them to see. Chloe covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Liam stared at the floor, shame written all over his face. "Do you have anything to say?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling with restrained anger. Chloe tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "Ethan, I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for it to happen?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. And for what?" "For him." He gestured toward Liam, who flinched at the accusation. Chloe broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I don't know why I did it. I felt trapped. I didn't think." "No, Ethan interrupted. You didn't think. And now, you've destroyed everything we built together." Liam stood abruptly. "I think I should go," he muttered, heading for the door. "No," Ethan said, his voice sharp. "You stay. You're just as guilty as she is." Liam froze, his hand on the doorknob. "This isn't just about Chloe," Ethan continued. "You knew she was married. You knew what you were doing, and you didn't care. So don't act like you're some innocent victim here." After what felt like an eternity, Ethan finally left the cabin. He didn't slam the door or yell as he walked away. He simply drove back to town, leaving Chloe and Liam to grapple with the wreckage of their choices. The next morning, Ethan packed his things and moved out of their home on Maplewood Avenue. He left a note on the kitchen counter. "Chloe, I hope you're happy with your choices. Max and I are leaving. Don't contact me. I deserve better than this. Ethan. When Chloe returned to an empty house, she broke down. The silence was deafening, the absence of Max's cheerful barks a painful reminder of what she had lost. Chloe tried to move forward, but the weight of her actions followed her everywhere. The affair had become public knowledge in their small town, and customers began avoiding her shop. Her friends stopped inviting her to gatherings, and even casual acquaintances offered only cold smiles and curt nods. She spiraled into depression, spending her nights replaying memories of Ethan and wondering how she had let it all fall apart. One night, in a moment of desperation, she called Ethan's number. The line rang endlessly before going to voicemail. "Ethan, please," she said through tears. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but I need you to know that I'll never forgive myself for what I did to us. Please, just call me back." But Ethan never called back. For Ethan, the road to healing wasn't easy. He stayed with a friend for a few weeks before renting a small apartment on the edge of town. Max became his constant companion, a source of comfort during the quiet nights. Ethan threw himself into his work, staying late at school to help students with projects and grading papers long into the evening. Slowly, he began to rediscover himself outside of his marriage. Through his hiking group, he met Olivia, a nurse with a quick wit and a warm smile. She was different from Chloe, steady, genuine, and honest. They started as friends, but over time, their connection deepened. For the first time in months, Ethan found himself smiling without forcing it. Weeks turned into months, and Chloe's life continued to unravel. The once thriving Petal and Vine had lost most of its regular customers, and her savings were dwindling. She sold her car to cover the rent on her shop, but it only bought her a little more time. Her therapist encouraged her to focus on self-improvement. "You can't undo the past, Chloe," she said gently. "But you can decide what kind of person you want to be moving forward." Chloe tried. She poured her energy into volunteer work, helping at a community garden that provided fresh produce to local food banks. The physical labor was grueling, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. Still, the regret lingered. One evening, after a long day at the garden, Chloe decided to take a walk. Without realizing it, she found herself in front of the house she and Ethan had shared. The porch light was on, and, through the window, she could see Ethan sitting at the dining table with a woman she didn't recognize. They were laughing, their faces lit by the glow of a candle. Chloe's heart clenched. She wanted to knock on the door, to explain, to apologize, anything to make him see how sorry she was. But instead, she turned and walked away, tears streaming down her face. Ethan's relationship with Olivia had grown stronger over the months. She had a calming presence that balanced Ethan's guarded nature. With her, he felt safe, not in a stagnant way, but in a way that encouraged him to open up and take risks again. One evening, they sat together on a bench overlooking the town park. Olivia rested her head on Ethan's shoulder as they watched the sunset. "Do you ever think about her?" Olivia asked softly. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I do," he admitted. "Not in a way that hurts anymore. More like, she's a lesson I needed to learn." Olivia squeezed his hand. "Do you hate her?" "No," Ethan said, surprising himself. "I don't think I ever hated her. I think I just hated what she did to us." Olivia nodded, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned shades of orange and purple. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt at peace. While Chloe and Ethan were navigating their new realities, Liam's life had taken a nosedive. Word of the affair had spread through the community, damaging his reputation as a contractor. Clients canceled jobs, and his phone stopped ringing. Frustrated and bitter, Liam began drinking more than he should. Nights that used to end with confidence and charm now ended in bar fights and regret. One night, he ran into an old friend who worked as a contractor in a neighboring town. The friend offered him a small job remodeling a vacation home, and Liam reluctantly agreed. The work was grueling and lonely, but it forced Liam to reflect. As he hammered nails into beams and painted walls, he thought about the choices he had made. The thrill of the affair had long since faded, leaving only the consequences in its wake. Liam knew he wasn't a victim. He had been a willing participant in Chloe's betrayal, and now he was paying the price. Months later, Chloe was restocking shelves at the community garden's small produce shop when the bell over the door jingled. She looked up and froze. Liam stood in the doorway, looking older and more tired than she remembered. "Chloe," he said, his voice tentative. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone colder than she intended. "I heard you were working here," Liam said, glancing around. "I thought maybe we could talk." Chloe shook her head. "I don't think that's a good idea, Liam." "Please," he said, stepping closer. "I know I messed up. I wanted to apologize. For everything." Chloe stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, let's talk outside." They sat on a bench near the garden, the air heavy with unspoken words. "I've been thinking a lot about what we did," Liam began, "and I realized how selfish I was. I should have walked away the moment I knew you were married. I didn't, and I'm sorry." Chloe nodded, her eyes misty. "I'm sorry too. I hurt Ethan in ways I'll never forgive myself for. And honestly, I hurt myself too." Liam offered a small, sad smile. "I hope you find a way to move forward." "You too," Chloe replied. It wasn't a reconciliation, it couldn't be. But it was a small step toward closure. Ethan's life continued to improve. With Olivia's encouragement, he applied for a fellowship to develop a history curriculum for underserved schools. When he received the acceptance letter, he couldn't wait to share the news. "I'm so proud of you," Olivia said, wrapping her arms around him. "You're going to do amazing things." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Chloe eventually closed her shop, accepting that it was time to let go. But the work she had done at the community garden had sparked a new passion. She applied for a position at a nonprofit that focused on sustainable agriculture and was thrilled when she got the job. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Chloe found herself smiling more often, her days filled with purpose. One afternoon, while organizing a volunteer event, she met Ben, a veterinarian who had come to give a workshop on animal care. He was kind, soft-spoken, and patient, a stark contrast to Liam's fiery charm. They started as friends, but over time, their bond deepened. Chloe was hesitant to open her heart again, but Ben's steady support helped her trust herself and others once more. Years later, Ethan and Olivia got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Max trotted down the aisle as their honorary ring bearer, earning delighted laughs from the guests. Chloe heard about the wedding through a mutual friend. She felt a pang of sadness, but it was different now, less of a longing and more of an acceptance. Ethan had found the happiness he deserved, and she was glad for him. As for Chloe, she and Ben had built a quiet, fulfilling life together. They moved into a cozy house with a sprawling garden, and Chloe often spent her weekends teaching kids about growing their own food. Every so often, she thought about Ethan, not with regret, but with gratitude. Their story had ended, but it had taught her lessons she would carry for the rest of her life. Ethan found that rebuilding trust, even with someone as genuine as Olivia, was harder than he'd anticipated. Though their relationship was strong, there were moments when doubt crept in, uninvited. A late text notification on Olivia's phone, a canceled dinner plan, things that wouldn't have registered before now made his chest tighten with unease. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together, Olivia caught him staring at her phone as it buzzed on the counter. She placed the knife down and turned to him, her expression soft but serious. "Ethan," she said gently, "you don't have to do that. If you're worried, just ask me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know it's not fair to you. It's just hard. After everything." Olivia stepped closer and took his hand. "I understand, but I'm not her, Ethan. I'm here, with you, and I'm not going anywhere." Her reassurance didn't fix everything overnight, but it was a moment that helped Ethan realize he couldn't let the past dictate his future. Chloe's relationship with Ben progressed slowly, and she was grateful for his patience. Ben never pushed her to talk about her past, though she could sense he was curious. One evening, after a particularly long day at the nonprofit, Chloe invited Ben over for dinner. They sat on the porch afterward, sipping wine and watching the fireflies dance in the yard. "You've been quiet tonight," Ben said, his voice gentle. Chloe hesitated, then decided it was time to let him in. "There's something I need to tell you," she began. She told him everything about Ethan, the affair, and the fallout that had reshaped her life. As she spoke, her voice trembled and tears slid down her cheeks. When she finished, Ben was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Chloe admitted. "But I needed you to know. I'm not proud of who I was back then." Ben reached for her hand. "We've all made mistakes, Chloe. What matters is who you are now. And from where I'm sitting, you're someone worth knowing." His words lifted a weight Chloe hadn't realized she was still carrying. Liam had spent the past year trying to piece his life back together. The work was slow, grueling, and often thankless, but it gave him time to reflect. One day, while grabbing coffee at a roadside diner, Liam overheard two men at the counter discussing a new housing development being built nearby. They were looking for contractors, and Liam saw an opportunity. He approached them, introducing himself and offering his services. To his surprise, they gave him a chance. The project became Liam's redemption arc. For the first time in years, he poured himself fully into his work, determined to rebuild not only homes but also his reputation. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan and Olivia hiked up one of their favorite trails. The leaves were golden and red, crunching beneath their boots as they walked. At the summit, Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket and turned to Olivia, his heart racing. "I never thought I'd find this again," he began, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I thought love wasn't something I deserved after everything that happened. But you've shown me otherwise. You've shown me what love should be." He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant ring. "Olivia, will you marry me?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. 1,000 times yes." As they embraced, Ethan felt a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. The wounds of his past were still there, but they had faded into scars, reminders of his strength and resilience. At the nonprofit's annual gala, Chloe was honored for her contributions to the community. She stood at the podium, looking out at the audience of volunteers, donors, and colleagues. "I never imagined I'd be standing here," she began, her voice steady. "A few years ago, I was lost. I had made mistakes, big ones, that cost me everything I thought I valued. But those mistakes also forced me to confront who I was and who I wanted to be." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "I'm grateful to this community for giving me a second chance, for reminding me that it's never too late to start over." The audience erupted into applause as Chloe stepped down, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time, she felt like she had truly forgiven herself. Several years later, Chloe found herself back in Maplewood Avenue, visiting a friend who had recently moved to the neighborhood. As she walked past her old house, she noticed a family playing in the front yard, a little girl chasing Max, now older but still spry. Ethan and Olivia sat on the porch, watching their daughter with pride and joy. They looked up, and for a brief moment, Ethan's eyes met Chloe's. He nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and perhaps forgiveness. Chloe returned the nod before turning away, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As she walked down the familiar street, Chloe realized she no longer felt the ache of regret. Life had moved on, and so had she. Liam's work on the housing development earned him a reputation as a reliable contractor once again. Though he still carried the scars of his past, he had learned to value stability over fleeting thrills. One day, while working on a site, a young apprentice asked him, "What's the most important lesson you've learned in this business?" Liam thought for a moment before replying, "Never cut corners. In work or in life, if you take shortcuts, it'll come back to bite you." The apprentice nodded, unaware of the deeper meaning behind Liam's words. Ethan and Olivia welcomed their second child, a baby boy, into their family the following spring. As Ethan held his son for the first time, he marveled at how much his life had changed. He thought about Chloe briefly, wondering if she had found happiness. Wherever she was, he hoped she had learned the same lesson he had. That love, real love, is built on trust, respect, and forgiveness. After her speech at the nonprofit gala, Chloe began to notice a shift in herself. She no longer shied away from her past. Instead, she started using her story to connect with others who had made mistakes but wanted to turn their lives around. One day, a young woman named Sarah approached her after a volunteer meeting. Sarah was tearful, confessing that she had recently cheated on her partner and didn't know how to move forward. "I feel like I've destroyed everything," Sarah said, her voice shaking. How did you fix it?" Chloe hesitated, searching for the right words. "You can't fix the past," she said gently, "but you can learn from it. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But if you take responsibility and work on becoming the person you want to be, you'll find a way forward." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." For Chloe, moments like these were both humbling and healing. She couldn't undo the pain she had caused Ethan, but perhaps she could prevent someone else from making the same mistakes. Liam's success with the housing development had led to more contracts, and he had begun to rebuild his reputation in the neighboring town. But despite his professional recovery, a sense of emptiness lingered. He realized that the reckless choices he had made in his personal life had left him without meaningful connections. One evening, as he was grabbing dinner at a small diner, he noticed Chloe sitting at a corner table, reading a book. She hadn't seen him yet, and Liam debated whether to approach her. Finally, he mustered the courage to walk over. "Chloe," he said, his voice tentative. Chloe looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Liam, what are you doing here?" "Working on a project nearby," he replied. "Do you mind if I sit?" She hesitated but then nodded. Their conversation was cautious at first, but as they talked, Liam apologized again for his role in their affair. "I've done a lot of thinking since then," he said. "I know I hurt you as much as I hurt myself." Chloe studied him for a moment before replying, "We both made mistakes, Liam. I've spent years trying to make peace with mine." Though they parted ways on neutral terms, the conversation left Liam with a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. Ethan's life with Olivia flourished. They moved to a home closer to the mountains, a place where their children could grow up surrounded by nature. Ethan often took his daughter, Emily, on hikes, teaching her about the history of the land and the importance of resilience. On one such hike, Emily asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, were you ever sad before you met Mom?" Ethan paused, crouching to adjust Emily's shoelace. "Yes, sweetheart, I was. But then I learned that even when bad things happen, you can find happiness again." Emily nodded solemnly, as if she understood more than a 5-year-old should. Later that evening, as Ethan watched Olivia rock their newborn son to sleep, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. His life had taken unexpected turns, but it had led him exactly where he was meant to be. Chloe's relationship with Ben deepened with time. He was patient, kind, and unwavering in his support. One evening, as they tended to their garden together, Ben knelt down to pull a stubborn weed. "Chloe," he said, looking up at her, "I've been thinking about something." She laughed. "Hopefully it's not about planting more zucchini. We're already swimming in it." Ben smiled, but his expression turned serious. "No, I've been thinking about us, about how much you mean to me." Chloe's heart skipped a beat as Ben stood, brushing the dirt from his hands. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know your past wasn't easy," he said, "but I love the person you are today. Will you marry me?" Chloe stared at him, tears filling her eyes. For years, she had doubted whether she deserved happiness. But in that moment, she realized that she did. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll marry you." A year later, by chance, Chloe and Ethan ran into each other at a farmer's market. Chloe was browsing a stall of fresh herbs when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Chloe." She turned to see Ethan, holding a basket of produce with Max trotting at his side. His face was older but still kind, and his eyes held a calm she hadn't seen before. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "It's good to see you." They chatted briefly, catching up on each other's lives. Chloe told him about her upcoming wedding to Ben, and Ethan spoke of his growing family. As they parted ways, Chloe felt a strange sense of peace. Seeing Ethan happy affirmed what she had known deep down. that they had both found the paths they were meant to walk. Ethan and Chloe's lives remained separate, but their shared experiences left an indelible mark on both of them. Ethan's history lessons often included stories about resilience and the power of second chances. Chloe's work at the nonprofit inspired countless individuals to believe in their own capacity for growth. Though they rarely thought of each other anymore, there was a quiet acknowledgement that their shared past had shaped them into the people they had become. Chloe's wedding to Ben was a small, intimate affair held in the community garden she had poured her heart into. The space was adorned with wildflowers and handmade decorations, each detail reflecting the couple's love for nature and simplicity. Chloe stood at the altar, her hands trembling as she held Ben's. As the officiant spoke about love and commitment, Chloe's thoughts briefly wandered to Ethan. She wondered if he ever thought about her, if he had truly forgiven her. When it was time for her vows, Chloe took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. Ben, you've shown me what it means to be loved for who I am, not for who I was, but for who I've become. You've taught me that love is not about perfection, but about patience, trust, and growth. I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to never take you for granted. As she slipped the ring onto Ben's finger, Chloe felt a deep sense of peace. She had found the love she had once thought was lost to her forever. 2 weeks after Chloe's wedding, Ethan received a letter in the mail. The envelope was plain, the handwriting familiar. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss interesting life stories, and write a comment if you like the story. See you.